Okay, we are laughing already in the preamble. Good morning, everyone, and happy Saturday. How's everyone doing out there?
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Good
Fabulous.
morning.
All right, too fun. All right, so we are February 21st or so here. So we are moving right on through the year. Welcome everyone to Voices of HealthPointe. What is Voices of HealthPointe? It's where a bunch of us gather 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, pretty much every Saturday. Obviously, that's earlier for people that are Mountain Time, and we've got some of those folks here. But we gather for about an hour, and we do what we call a walk and talk, which is where we're just going to cover topics and conversations and have conversations and dialogue, all things health and wellness, and all things specifically the HealthPointe program. So we've got clients in here, we've got coaches in here, prospective clients, etc. And we just have a really, really great time. For those that aren't able to join us live or choose not to, these episodes do get uploaded onto YouTube under Voices of HealthPointe. So you just search for Voices of HealthPointe and you'll find well over 100 episodes there. So the way we structure things is we typically have some known docket items that we'll go through where people have some topics they want to cover, and then we break into just kind of general dialogue on those things. And we've got a number of docket items, so we're going to get hustling here. I've got a docket item called A1C Explained, more than a blood sugar test. Then we're going to go to Charlie McGinnis on what we call NSVs, which is a non-scale victories. We often talk about non-scale victories in the HealthPointe program. And Charlie just had a recent lab work on blood tests. And so he's going to give us some non-scale victories and chat about that a bit. Then we've got David Munoz that's going to be talking about scanning for better health. And that'll be real fun, talking about a particular app that you can use. And then we've got Steve Beber that is going to give an update on NSF. Steve's just a real expert and really knows the folks over there at NSF. So we're going to get an update from him on that. So as you can see, that's a lot of docket items, particularly given how much we chat about each docket item as well. So let's get rolling here. First thing I want to say is that the content shared here is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Our discussions draw on wellness concepts similar to those found in the HealthPointe methodology, which we hold in high regard. The ideas presented are independently developed and do not represent or speak on behalf of the HealthPointe brand. Okay, and again, my docket item is titled A1C Explained, more than a blood sugar test. In some of our recent Monday morning walk and talks, there have been a few references to A1C. And it makes sense if that term feels only partially familiar. Most people know it as something to do with blood sugar. They hear it in conversations about prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. They know it matters, but what it actually represents is often less clear. So today, let's slow it down and unpack it. It helps to begin with something many people have experienced, a finger prick glucose reading. When you check your blood sugar with a small drop of blood, you are getting a snapshot, a single moment in time. If it's done first thing in the morning, it reflects fasting glucose at that moment. If it's done after a meal, it reflects how your body handled that particular meal. It's basically a photograph. A1C is not a photograph. It's closer to a 3-month time lapse. And the reason we say 3 months is because that is roughly the lifespan of a red blood cell. In a moment, we'll see why that detail matters. Inside your bloodstream are millions of red blood cells. Each one carries hemoglobin, which is a protein whose primary job is to bind oxygen in your lungs and deliver it to tissues throughout your body. Hemoglobin has another characteristic that is less well known. When glucose circulates in the bloodstream, some of it attaches to this hemoglobin protein in a passive chemical process called glycation. Maybe some of you have heard that term, glycation. Nothing directs this. It happens in proportion to how much glucose is present. Picture warm caramel slowly being drizzled over an apple. The apple did nothing to invite it. the caramel simply coats the surface. The more caramel that flows past, the thicker the layer becomes. That is glycation. Red blood cells circulate for roughly 90 to 120 days before being recycled and replaced. During that lifespan, they are continuously exposed to whatever glucose levels are present in the bloodstream. When a lab measures hemoglobin A1C, it calculates the percentage of hemoglobin that has glucose attached to it. Because those red blood cells have been circulating for about 3 months, the result reflects the average glucose exposure over that period. That is why A1C is a time lapse rather than a snapshot. In practical terms, A1C is generally grouped into 3 ranges. Normal range is below 5.7%. Prediabetes is 5.7 to 6.4%. And type 2 diabetes range is if it's 6.5% and above. These thresholds help guide conversations, but underneath those categories is the same principle. Higher percentages mean more glycation, which means greater average glucose exposure. So why does this matter? It matters because persistent elevation in glucose usually reflects a shift in how the body is handling energy, particularly in the area of insulin signaling. Insulin is a hormone released by the pancreas after you eat. It travels through the bloodstream and approaches cells with a clear message. Glucose is available. At the surface of each cell, insulin binds to receptors and essentially kind of knocks on the door saying, open up. There's energy here to bring inside the cell. When everything is working well, the cell responds to that knock. The door opens, glucose moves from the bloodstream into the cell, where it can be stored or used for energy. But when that knocking becomes too frequent and forceful because of highly refined carbohydrates, sodas, sweetened beverages, fast food meals, ultra-processed snacks, or repeatedly reaching into a box of crackers or potato chips throughout the day, glucose rises quickly and often. Insulin is released again and again to manage it. The knocking does not stop. This knocking is incessant. Over time, with that pattern of rapid spikes and repeated surges, cells can begin to respond less enthusiastically. The body may even send more insulin to amplify the message, but on the inside of the door, the cell becomes less responsive. Let me do a, one moment, guys. I'm going to do a mute all here. One moment. Okay, guys. Apologize for that. Sometimes I forget to do a mute all and we have a hot mic going on. So getting back to my spot here, but on the inside of the door, the cell becomes less sensitive to the repeated knock. Again, so we are working through where insulin, this hormone, is released. It's basically something that comes up to the cell and it's kind of knocking on the door and saying, hey, we have glucose available. And in a good setting, that cell is going to open up that door and that's going to move into the cell where it can be used for either energy production or storage, okay? But when cells do not respond as effectively to insulin, glucose remains in the bloodstream longer. And when glucose remains elevated longer, more of it attaches to hemoglobin. Over weeks and months, that pattern is reflected in a higher A1C. So A1C is not just a blood sugar number. It is a reflection of how responsive your cells are to insulin over time. It is a window into metabolic flexibility. We talk quite a bit about metabolic flexibility. It also explains why someone can have a normal fasting glucose on a finger prick test, yet still have an elevated A1C. The individual snapshots may look steady, but their overall exposure across days and weeks tells a broader story. Because A1C is downstream, it does not tell you exactly what caused the elevation. It doesn't measure sleep quality. It doesn't measure daily movement. It doesn't account for stress-related cortisol elevations that can nudge glucose upwards. It simply reflects the average environment. So this is where structure and healthy habits become meaningful. When daily walking increases, muscles become more active reservoir for glucose. When adequate protein supports lean muscle mass, insulin signaling often improves. When meals emphasize whole foods and nutrient density, post-meal volatility tends to moderate. When sleep stabilizes, hormonal rhythms support steadier glucose regulation. And those rhythms repeat, the metabolic environment shifts. New red blood cells are constantly being formed. If they circulate in a steadier glucose environment, less caramel accumulates on the hemoglobin. 3 months later, A1C reflects that change. This is one of the quiet strengths of the HealthPointe 6-week cycle. HealthPointe is not structured around chasing lab values. It's structured around reshaping the upstream environment, stabilizing blood sugar, encouraging daily movement, supporting muscle preservation, emphasizing whole foods, and micronutrient density. It all builds metabolic flexibility. When the upstream environment changes, the downstream markers like A1C tend to follow, not because of one perfect week, but because of repeated rhythm and habits. Red blood cells turn over. The body renews them constantly, which means the story updates. The next 90 days can look different from the last 90. So if you know your A1C number, think of it as a summary of recent metabolic conditions. The more useful question becomes, what kind of environment are my cells living in each day? Because the number does not move first. The environment moves first, and the number follows. Okay, guys, that is my docket item. Remember, I just did a mute all, so if you do care to comment before we move on to our next docket item, you do need to do your unmute button on your microphone. But any comments or questions or thoughts on that docket item on A1C?
Oh, I loved it. It explained a lot. And I used it with my mom because she really could use the help. So it was well explained and well thought out. So thank you.
You're welcome. You know, A1C, it does, kind of get into the weeds a little bit and some space that hopefully with using some metaphors of a caramel apple, it makes it a little bit easier to understand that cell that's kind of getting coated in this glucose and this sugar kind of glycation. So yeah,
It does,
now,
but it
now we
made
know a
me
little bit.
hungry. I haven't had breakfast yet.
That's not the point, David. That's not the point of that docket item. Don't go running for your caramel apple breakfast. So, well, again, we've got a number of docket items and, of course, our ongoing discussion. So we can always circle back to this if anybody wants to later. But let's move on because our next docket item, Charlie, I know you and Ann have a bit of a tight schedule on most of these mornings. So if we can go over to you on your non-scale victory and have you comment on that, Charlie, if you're available.
Well, first off, terrific job as always, just explaining the science and making it so simple. We always appreciate that. Yeah, just real briefly, I had a complete physical, and unlike usually when they go through the blood work, I get over the years had real quick. This number's fine, fine, fine. This wonderful lady took over almost an hour, went through everything, and across the boards. And I guess this is no surprise to anybody doing the health point and seeing the results in general. Across the board, the numbers were just absolutely phenomenal. In fact, she only brought up one little issue, and she said, I wouldn't even bring up this because if I look across my scale of patients, you by far are doing the best I've seen in weeks, if not months. So once again, just the health point is right on as far as overall health, not just the weight loss, but the overall health. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
Wow, thank you, Charlie. Yeah, that we term it a non-scale victory. Like Charlie's saying, as HealthPointe, it's not Diet Point. We don't call it Diet Point. It's called HealthPointe. And what Charlie just went through in terms of these biomarkers that most of us get on some sort of an annual exam or a 6-month exam is a peek into your systems, your biology, and these doctors, these physicians, like you're saying, Charlie, they're they've got to be just so pleasantly, I want to say probably surprised sometimes when they see some of the numbers, like someone like Charlie that comes in, and it's probably a breath of fresh air when they can finally get somebody that has some really, really dialed in numbers. And like you say, Charlie hasn't seen it in maybe weeks, if not months. I know, Carol, you and Hank have commented that your doctor has said something like, you're going to have to get a new doctor or something like that because, you guys are coming in with these numbers that, are just in a way almost like too good. What can they do other than just say, great job and move on. But thank you again,
Hi,
Charlie,
Eric.
on that. That's really great.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, good morning, Hank. Speaking of Hank.
I'm just listening in because I just went through that with my doctor. You're right. I mean, there is nothing that was out of range on all my tests. I mean, 2 pages of tests. Okay, everything was within range, and he looked at me, says, first of all, you're my healthiest patient I've got, and you're in your 90s. Unbelievable. Okay, because we follow the Health Point system. And then he said, I'm retiring in 10 years. You need to find another doctor then, okay? And I cracked up. I said, thank you very much. The best news I've had. So he said, stay healthy, keep doing what you're doing. And I end up giving him
Um,
one of my, I eat one of my wellness bars every morning. I gave him one of that. He says, oh, great. Thank you. Maybe my numbers will start looking like yours. So anyway, just want to share that.
I love that. And just for context and any new viewers in here, your age now is what, Hank?
Uh, in fact, yesterday made me 92 and a half.
Happy birthday, and 92 and a half. Fantastic. And I only ask that, everyone, because Hank has been very clear on his age. He's not definitely not shy about his age. In fact, he is proud of it and should be, because it's one thing to go into a doctor at um, 22 and a half or 32 and a half and have these everything in range and having that conversation with a doctor. But when they start seeing people that are 72 and 82, and in Hank's case, 92, and is having these amazing biological markers, it's something to shout from the rooftops. And so, um, well, um,
I might add in on that Hank has no meds, nor do I, but Hank has no meds and all his original parts. No surgeries, no replacements, all original Hank. So,
that is so great. And that's another thing too. I mean, you guys have probably experienced this. I think it, becomes more shocking to a physician, when you're, I would say probably in 60s, but certainly, 70s, 80s, and 90s, where you go in and they're like, am I missing something here? Like, where's your meds? And to be clear, guys, we're not anti-medication. That's not the point here, is there's a time and a place for meds. But, if we just talked about A1C. If your A1C is chronically elevated, they may be talking a med of metformin or something, because they're trying to get that number down. If you have, certain other markers, they may be prescribing, statins or something. If your blood sugar is really an issue, they may be we talked about how your pancreas will secrete more insulin to try to get that into the blood cells. Well, anyone that is familiar with someone that's type 2 diabetic, they may be taking insulin injection. So there's another med. So when you walk into an office and say, there's no meds, the doctor can sometimes be like, what? It's kind of unusual, right? So great stuff. Thank you, Carol. Well, we're going to keep things moving along. Again, we can always circle back on all of these topics, on A1C, on blood sugar, on Charlie's and overall lipid panels and annual exams and so forth. But we're going to move on to David Munoz on the docket item titled Scanning for Better Health. So David Munoz.
Good morning, everybody. Well, actually, I heard this on the radio, and it was just a quick passing. So I thought I'd check it out. Haven't heard it before. It's called what this is it scans barcodes and tells you on a HealthPointe scale from 0 to 100 how healthy it is. So it's called the Yuka app, Yuka. It's got about 45 million users. So I was surprised to see that. Yuka, I'll read you something on it. Yuka is an app that scans foods and cosmetics products in order to know their impact on your health. Created by three co-founders, Benoit Martin, Francios Martin, and Julio Chapin. It was in 2017. It's an independent app. It receives no financial from any brand or manufacturer, so no one can influence their analysts or recommendation. How it works, like I said, you just scan the barcode. Yuka breaks down the good and the bad of most household and cosmetic products, giving them a score of 100. The idea is that scanning the barcode, you'll get a quick, easy overview of the healthy environment impacts of the products. Yuka scores food based on nutritional qualities, the presence of additives, or whether or not the product is organic. They also consider the number of calories, sugar, salt, saturated fat, proteins, and fiber in each product, taking into account independent studies. 10% of the score comes down to whether or not the products have an official seal from the national or international organization to show they're certified organic. When the products receive the lowest score, the app it does offer alternative food or product recommendations they say are better for your health. I've actually scanned a couple of things and tried it, and it does show alternatives on the bottom. For example, instead of ordinary table salt, you can recommend the sea salt. It gets its data because it builds its own database, and data contains over 5 million products, and all the data comes from either app users, whether users upload information themselves, or via brands, where brands email their product data. So it sounds pretty good, but this is what I did find out from further research on it. The Yuka app is widely praised for helping users identify unhealthy ingredients and negative food choices, with many users finding it a helpful tool for improving dietary habits. Users, particularly in Trustpilot reviews, often find it quick, accurate, and useful, though sometimes report the app scoring can sometimes be misleading or inconsistent. Experts, however, note that it can oversimplify nutrition data and that its good-bad ratings may not always align with U.S. standards. So key strengths are the users love quick barcode scanning features for on-the-spot nutritional checks in store. Healthy alternatives, app provides recommendations for better ones, often healthier products. Transparency is highly appreciated for highlighting hidden additives. High sugar, salt content for some. The key is avoiding extensive time-consuming ingredient readings. It's app-free, so you're not getting any apps from this as well. Critics say that it's oversimplification. Critics argue that it can oversimplify complex nutrition data, sometimes penalizing healthy fats or natural sugars in some ways to unhealthy ingredients. Some feel the risk classification of additives is not always based on accurate or actual realistic consumption levels. Some users have reported that good products can sometimes receive low scores causing confusion, potential for fear mongering, and limited scope, are some of the other ones. So in the end, I think that It's a great app because I've used it a couple times myself just to see what it's like. I think it can give you like the hidden additives, and it does give you healthy alternatives to food. But I wouldn't discount everything. I would talk to your health coach to find out, hey, is this something I thought this was good, but is this really good or bad? Talk to the health coach and find out from them and see, is this a good alternative for me, or what do you suggest instead of this? What do you think?
Nice. Nice. Thank you for that review of that. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that app. I've heard of it, but that's really, really great segment there, David. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts or questions?
I would just comment. Someone told me about it, and I tried it with a few things, and some of our stuff, some of the brand X stuff, and I'm like, well, that doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know. I'm glad to hear that review because I think there's some good things that can come out of it. But if somebody were to follow that thing exclusively, I mean, I know, I don't know. One of the things they recommended me, I can't remember what I put in there. Wasn't even something I was eating, and they recommended pork rinds would be better. Well, okay, maybe I don't know. That's not something I would recommend to anybody. I get maybe there's some value in them, but I'm like, if it's coming out of a bag, I'm not interested. So, but there are some good things. If they don't have anything else, that's a good thing. That at least there's looking and checking. That's the good thing about the app. Somebody's at least interested in what's in what they're eating or using on their skin or whatever. So thanks, David, for talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
helpful for like hidden additives. I think that's what I've been seeing a lot for myself.
Yeah, I probably about maybe 6 months ago, I came upon the Yucca app and started using it, and I found it very informational. And I think I agree with David and Laurel and the reviews, somewhat mixed reviews. Good, I think mostly good, but I know there was a few things in there that I knew were very healthy, but because of I think it was the fat content, they kind of put fat in a ball, Well, there's a lot of issues about fat, good and bad, and they didn't necessarily take those into consideration. But I think for the most part, it was helpful. But I agree with Laurel. Some of the things I thought were a little in the box, um, and that's understandable. The other thing that I'm finding lately is on YouTube, there's a lot of comparisons. We talked about the Florida Health app, and they took three foods into consideration: candy, bread, and what was the third one now? Anyway, three things into consideration, and what were good and what were not good. And there's a number of those also that are on YouTube. And again, all of this could be suggestive or, I don't think I would take anything with a totally 100%. If there was something in there that didn't look right to you, I think I would do some more research on it. But I know there was one on yogurts, the healthy yogurts, and then the not so healthy ones. And they listed about, I think it was 12 yogurts that were not so healthy, maybe even 15. And these are yogurts that are in the stores. You'll recognize every one of them. And then it listed the 5 yogurts that were the best yogurts. And I thought that one was very good, actually. On the fat versus the no fat, the sugar, the low carb, all of those types of things. It brought some very good descriptions. And then there was one on olive oils. And one thing we learned, Hank and I learned on olive oils was make sure that the olive oil that you're selecting is from one source, not multiple sources. Because in multiple sources, it's much harder to control the quality of the oil because they're coming from different countries. So I thought that was very interesting. But there's a number of different ones on there that will pop up, and I personally find them interesting. And again, I think all of this stuff you have to put in your kind of your cadre of knowledge. And then if there's something that sticks out that just doesn't sound right, just do some further research on it. I don't think anything is 100%. but they certainly are all very valuable. Just learning about, what's really in our foods today, and it ain't a pretty picture. So back to you, Eric.
I love that, the way you just kind of like broadly discuss that, Carol, because let me just ask this kind of, people can respond to this, but I think I know the answer. How many people, before HealthPointe, never really turned a product over and looked at that white nutrition label on it? I mean, Emily and I will raise our hands on that. And yet now, what's virtually the first thing that we do if we pick a product off the shelf? If we pick up, like you're saying, Carol, a yogurt, or we're looking at these kefir, kind of a yogurt type drink, any product. But before HealthPointe, I knew those white nutrition labels on a product existed, but I never read them. And candidly, I wouldn't have known really what to kind of focus on now anyway. So I think one of the things that happens with people on HealthPointe is this progression, where, you start first by maybe looking at these food labels. Maybe you use an app like David is reviewed, and Carol, you and Laurel have talked about. And then great caveat, David, talking about, just check with your coach on this as well. Just see, not only from the perspective of the health, but is it appropriate for your journey and your goals that you have set out in front of you? If it is weight loss, for example, because as we know, certain things can be healthy, but not appropriate for this segment of your 6-week cycle. They'll be appropriate later once you hit your OHG, your optimal health goal, and you are transitioning into lifetime maintenance. That's where some of those things, and those are independent of any like healthy rating on an app. That has to do with the biological processes that you're trying to create to get to your goal. So no, this is a great discussion. And what I feel so great about is that we all have experienced, ourselves and others just being more mindful of this when we shop. Instead of just blindly pulling things off of shelves or out of bins, we are mindful, we're educated, we are thoughtful, we know how to get answers on things. And that alone is a huge win when it comes to the benefits of this program and this community. So
Eric,
wonderful.
I really loved your comments, and I think the difference here and what you were bringing out is, where are you on your life goal, your journey? Are you in wellness? I mean, sorry, not wellness, weight loss. Are you in weight loss? Well, if you're in weight loss, you're probably going to look a little bit more on certain things that if you're in lifetime maintenance. A good one would be fat. Okay, if you're in weight loss, maybe you really want to have a low fat, or keep your fat content down because you're in weight loss. But on the other hand, if you're in lifetime maintenance and you want a good overall healthy eating plan for the rest of your life, fats are very important. And so that's where what you said, work with your coach, is so valuable, Eric. Thank you for clarifying that, because it just depends on where you are in your journey. And very, very important point. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I would add that having any app, like I know before I did HealthPointe, I used the Lose It app, which is going to be a free app or you can buy the whole thing. But I use it primarily because it's got the scanner like this Yuka does. And so if I'm looking at a product, not in a store, but maybe I see it in a magazine or I pull it, somebody mentions it, and you pull it up online, any of that stuff, any foods, pretty much you can pull up online to the website of the company and get that nutrition label. And sometimes even the barcode. Anyways, I use that scanner in the Lose It app to scan foods all the time. So I'm not dinking around in the grocery store looking at 6 different ones if I'm trying to buy something new. Or I just use, like Carol said, get the Maple Hill or whatever it was, the yogurt. Sometimes somebody's done the research for you. But I think having some kind of app like that, whether it's Yuka or Lose It or all the other ones that are out there, can be a time saver. And again, I just feel like it's, at least they're looking for the information. And those apps kind of speed it up, make it less laborious, because even my husband would go, he looks at the labels down the store, but the app just makes it a lot easier. So that's it.
Yeah, what I like about the app is that, it has these ingredients in there, like not only tells you, hey, this ingredient, which probably 9 out of 10 of us don't realize what these ingredients are, and it states, what it can do and why it's not good. And so you're at least mindful of the situation. And for Carol, I love the fact that we're talking about the fat. And my when we're trying to lose weight, we're trying to actually lose fat, so we don't want to lose muscle, so just not overall weight, but we want to lose fat. So I just told a couple of family members, so you're eating bacon and you're trying to lose weight. You're trying to lose fat. So why are you putting fat in your body, which you're trying to lose? So it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, great discussion, great tool, great insight, great perspective. And speaking of hidden ingredients or things in products that we don't know that they're in there necessarily, it's all about having third-party independent rating organizations. And with that, we can't get anybody better to queue up than Steve. Steve, if you're there, and you had a docket item on an update from on NSF, which is one of those wonderful third-party rating companies. So Steve, take it away, please.
Well, thank you, Eric. Good segue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we are so fortunate that we've got NSF certification on, I think now the count is 174 different products that Nutrilite and Amway put out. And I've been out there, well, now 4 times. So I was just out there on Wednesday, and the contact I had with the Ann Arbor Chamber is the director of standards at NSF, and found out that she had worked on the Nutrilite products for 15 years prior to being in the position she's in now. So she was very, very familiar with Nutrilite products. But one of the things I was really curious, we have finally, we got NSF certification on energy and focus, but yet on the blister pack, it was not there. And so, I asked customer service at the corporation, what's up with that? The same product, why not? And, finally the answer I got back was that I'm passing that on to the, how they put it, onto the department that can answer that. Well, never heard anything back from that. So when I was out there, I said to her, okay, I said, our energy and focus product, and finally has been NSF certified as of late summer, early fall, somewhere along in there. But I said, the blister pack, same product, but no NSF certification. So what's up with that? Well, she said, if a product is put in another packaging, like blister pack, and if everything isn't exactly the same as what was on the bottle, well, then that would make a difference. That would have to be recertified. I said, well, all the information seems to be identical on both. She says, well, then the other thing would be is when the original product was submitted for certification, if they didn't include the other packaging item, like the blister pack, at that same time, then it would have to be resubmitted when they do the annual review, and then certify the blister pack. So I'm assuming, that probably is what happened, I'm assuming. But one thing I asked her is that, when you're certifying any nutrition, what's the time frame? And of course, that depends on the claims they're, certifying. But she said minimum of 6 months. And some must have taken a long time for Double X, because they certified 7 different things for that. And I don't know how many different claims they certified for energy and focus, but she said 6 months minimum for water purification. That takes at least 9 months. And if something comes up a negative reading, then they redo it just to be sure that they didn't miss something. she says a lot of times we'll get some false positives or false negatives, and we got to recheck. And 9 months at least for water purification. But on our previous water purification system, the head toxicologist I had talked to at that time said that unit, even when it says the filter is used up, she said there is still 50 gallons of life left in that filter. And I thought, well, that's really, really cool that they built that in so that all of a sudden you're not poisoning yourself because the red light went on and you're not getting the filter change. So I didn't ask her about this one, but I'm assuming that's probably the same deal, that there's life, obviously life left after the filter is used up. But they originally they were started by 3 docs from the School of Public Health here at University of Michigan for standards on foods. But man, they have really expanded now. Another part of town here, they have a facility totally dedicated to certification of piping for houses, for plumbing. So now they've expanded out to that, and she's also, and she didn't clarify exactly, but she's working on a project where they're doing certifications for Amazon. And I'm not sure what they're trying to certify there, but I mean it's quite a company. It's been around 80 years, and we are so fortunate that we've got the NSF certification in our products because we put 180-day guarantee on all of the nutrition, for example. And when you were talking about hemoglobin, I think that was kind of key because a lot of times somebody would be taking a product, not ours, brand X, off the shelf, 30-day guarantee, maybe 60. But for crying out loud, like you were saying, hemoglobin, 90 days to replicate. And if you got a product that's certified or that is a guarantee less than that, well, if you take your blood draw and you find out, well, numbers aren't what they should be, and oh, guys, now it's way past the end of end of the guarantee because that brand X product had a short guarantee. You're out of luck. And I always promote that to people that our guarantee goes quite a while. Why doesn't brand X? And anyhow, in that certification, we are so fortunate we've got that on our products. And both her and the previous the head toxicologist I talked to, they were just very, very impressed with what Nutrilite does and the quality and those kind of things. So one of the parting note, one of the times I was out there, I took a doc with me that had been involved with collegiate drug testing. And he said more often than not, when an athlete has a banned substance in his body, it's usually accidental, not always, sometimes it's on purpose, but usually accidental. And the athlete took something made on the cheap, and stuff was mixed in a contaminated container, and now this guy's paying the price, or this girl's paying the price for having a contaminant in their body they had no idea about. So he said to her, to the doc, he said, "So why don't other companies do what Nutrilite does?" She looked him square in the eye. She says, "Because Nutrilite really cares." And he goes, "Oh, wow, really?" So, we are very fortunate. We got a top quality product, and it had being backed up with NSF certification. That carries a lot of weight. So that's about it. Just wanted to let you know that that's why we don't have a certification on the blister pack yet. And one thing she did say is, companies have to get in when they want to submit a product. They have to get in line, and there's a long line. So we may have things we wonder why aren't they certified. It takes a while, and they just may have to wait their turn, of course. So that's about it. Turn it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. You're such an expert. You're right there, proximity, and your interest is there, and your relationships are there. So nobody better to be able to give us an update on NSF. We're so grateful and appreciative on the times that you've talked about the NSF. And it's so true. And you mentioned about the other products that they're getting into is interesting. I want to say it was actually just last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. Emily and I were doing some our grocery shopping, and this is in a Whole Food store, and they had this corner rack that had these cutting boards on there. Now you think cutting boards, what's a big deal with cutting boards? And we're looking at them because Emily was looking for a particular type of cutting board or a smaller one or something like that. And we noticed that this cutting board had NSF certified. And we said, well, that is interesting. And immediately, because I am familiar with NSF and the value of this third party, very strong, very stringent, very regimented, high standards, rating. I mean, we ultimately didn't get that cutting board, but it was only because we couldn't find the size and everything that she was looking for. But you think about a cutting board, you're putting food on there, you're putting, what are these cutting boards? What type of material are they made out of? If they're made out of wood, was there some sort of preservative that was put in? Is there some sort of formaldehyde in the wood? Is there whatever, but I will tell you, like you say, Steve, that NSF sticker on there to me gave instant validation that if we could have found what we were looking for from the other things that we were looking for, we absolutely would have bought that over another one that did not have that independent third-party NSF rating. So, such a great stamp of approval for sure.
I put a few years ago, I put a metal shelving unit up down on our lower level, just to stick stuff on and whatnot. And I'll send them again. Right in the middle of one of the shelves, it says NSF. Really? So they're expanding a lot of different products. So it's it's a very interesting company. So
it
thanks,
sure is. Super. Yeah, thank you, Steve. Laurel, you've got your hand up. I don't know if by accident or
no, that was actually on purpose. I just wanted to, I know we're getting at the end, and there was a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we talked about the Neutralite moving to Michigan and the tours and stuff. And I just wanted to add on. I did hear back from my son, and I keep forgetting to tell people, but I'm just going to read you what he wrote back. And he said, the entire facility at Buena Park is being shut down, which is what we knew. They're slowly reducing staff and production as they build the new facilities in Ada. They've already sold the property in Buena Park and are leasing it back for the remainder of 2026. He said, I'm not exactly sure about the tours of the new areas. They've always continued tours of the main complex for certain groups or pin levels. What will remain in California is a separate facility which will serve as their service center, out of which they'll process orders. That's located about 10 minutes away from Buena Park, and there's no intention of closing that since it services Western US and Western Canada. And I said, when are they projecting for all of that to be completed? I know it could change. And am I okay to share this? He said, yeah, you can share that. And he said, he's at the human resource area. Their plan is all the employees will be moved out of that facility in California by the end of this year. So he would assume that everything would be in place that is going to be in place in Ada by the first of next year. So that was what the update he gave me.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that update. We were, kind of hanging on pins and needles for that. Again, I've popped in there, talked with just kind of the guard shack person in terms of that, but no better insight than your son on that. So what I'm understanding or what I'm hearing is it's all moving, and that's the timeline, but it's and there is the tours that are at the main headquarters, but in terms of down on Spalding, where this is being built out, we don't know yet whether they will do a touring type arrangement similar to what they had in Buena Park. That's still TBD.
Right. I think, and there may be, somebody else may know that. I think he felt like they like keeping the tours. They like doing that. But I'm just guessing that because it's going to be new facilities, they got to get the employees all on board. They're going to need tours that they're bringing from California, and so and they may just limit it to certain pin groups or prearranged groups or whatever. But he didn't say one way or the other, but I got the feeling from him that that's probably something in their plans because they're already doing it at the main world headquarters there. So anyway,
Right.
if I hear anything, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much, Laurel. That is a really, really great update and insight, and it really sounds a positive direction. We've got another hand raised by Jerry and Sharon Webb. Good morning, guys. It's even earlier over there. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Eric, and to everyone on the call. I just have two quick things, and I'll make sure they're quick. But the first one is just a shout out to this walk and talk. I love all of the walk and talks that go on in a week, and they all have their purpose. But this one is so informative and covers different things. And I'm with people with great knowledge and doing research, etc. And so just a shout out for this walk and talk and all of you that are consistently on this and sharing. We want you to know that we do appreciate you. And the question I have is on your docket item this morning, as talking about the A1C levels, et cetera, et cetera. You mentioned something called glycation. And I was just wondering, here's just the question. I'm familiar with a product called glycine, a supplement. And I'm wondering, are you familiar with that? And is it related to the glycation that you were talking about with the A1C?
Great question. And first, thanks for that shout out on the value of this walk and talk. And we appreciate, the fact that you and Sharon are part of that research and insight and value. So, but again, I guess all of us are collectively appreciative of all of us, I guess is the best way to say that. But thank you for that, Jerry. I do agree also that this walk and talk stands out. First of all, it's longer, so we have time and bandwidth to be able to do these types of things. But also, it's very kind of heavy on the education part of it, which kind of makes it fun to do. Regarding your question on glycine and glycation, first, candidly, no, I'm not familiar. So that would be the first thing that I would say from my standpoint. So with that as a caveat, my sense of it would that be that there is not a correlation or any kind of a similarity other than kind of the phonetics of it. I base that on the fact that the glycation is that that biological process, that hot caramel dripping on and coating the surface of the apple, and that's what's happening with the sugar, the glucose in the bloodstream, attaching to the hemoglobin, kind of attaching or glycating to that red blood cell. Another metaphor is kind of like that caramelization that can happen when you, not caramelization saying like a caramel apple, but if you've ever like cooked a steak or something like that in a fry pan and you kind of have that browning, or even grilling it, it's kind of that caramelization, that coating, you kind of think of it like that. So to be clear, again, I don't know. I'm curious, as I always am. I hear things in this walk and talk, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to dig into that a little bit because that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that, so I do some research. But if I had to guess, and it's only a guess, I think it's something different. But maybe somebody else knows something here in the community. Anybody else familiar with glycine? Great question, Jerry, by the way. And we have either all mutes or no nobody in the community. Crickets, which is great. You stumped us, Jerry. Thank you. No, great question. And and we all learn, right? We learn. We're going to learn. We learned an update here from Laurel on this thing. We're going to learn. We know we're already anticipating the next update. Who knows what we'll know in 6 months on that? But sometimes these topics rise up during this walk and talk that we don't know the answer to, and then we learn and grow, and that makes it fun as well.
I do have a quick 30-second research on it. So
Sure.
glycine is the simplest non-essential amino acid vital for producing protein, collagen, and antioxidants like glutathione. It benefits sleep quality, supports metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, reduces inflammation, and protects against muscle loss. Commonly consumed in high protein foods like meat, dairy, and legumes, legumes, is generally safe, though high doses may cause rare, mild digestive upset. 30-second review. Search.
Okay. That's great. So, and we've again reflecting back on Steve Beber, one of our amino acids expert here, who has done great segments not only here but also on Monday nights for the amino acids. So that kind of confirms, and from David Munoz, thank you, David, on that. And so it does not seem like there's anything associated. And actually, I did a quick search here, and I'll just scan this real quick. Give me a second. Okay, interesting. All right, so no, glycine supplementation is not associated with glycation. So there's your answer on that, Jerry. In fact, and here's where it gets interesting, it's often the opposite. Glycation is the non-enzymatic binding of sugar, okay, to proteins, forming what's called AGEs. I didn't get into that in my topic, but that stands for advanced glycation end products. If you hear somebody reference to AGE, that's advanced glycation end products. So some of these things that can happen with that glycation. Glycine is an amino acid and does not promote that process. Okay, but this is interesting. It says, well, this is actually, okay. This is where, digging into it more will bring more clarity. So it says glycation is a non-enzymatic binding of sugar. I covered that. Glycine is an amino acid and does not promote that process. So therefore, it's saying, and then it says actually some research suggests glycine may actually help reduce glycation stress by the following: supporting glutathione production, buffering oxidative stress, improving metabolic health markers, potentially lowering AGE formation in some contexts. So although glycine is not glycation, they just sound familiar. If anything, glycine is generally considered supportive in metabolic and anti-inflammatory pathways. So I think if I understood your question and maybe just guessing at the context of it, it would be the question, like if I took a glycine supplement, which is what you referred to, Jerry, could this be advantageous or helpful in terms of reducing glycation? This suggests that actually it could. In fact, it specifically says that. So there you go, Jerry. A brief research, but some research. Thank you, David, as well on that. Hopefully that was helpful, Jerry.
Just another quick thought is that sometimes when you read some of these things, if they're a non-Nutrilite product, I don't know if Jerry's even talking about a specific product, but if they're a non-Nutrilite product, what I like to do is go down the ingredients, because even if they say they're very natural on the product, what is it? Is it bromelain that you get in pineapple and that, is in our supplements? Is it this? Is it that? And what's interesting is, in most cases, in many cases, probably a little bit more than many, you'll find that it is in either our double X, concentrated fruits and vegetables, omegas, and some of those foundational products that we take. And if it's not, and they is a high amount, then look at what is in our product line, because the difference in our product line is that they take it as a whole with all of the ingredients around it. And that's why we call it a whole food product. So just like a vitamin C isn't just vitamin C, it's maybe acerola cherry, and that's got magnesium, and it's got vitamin this and that, and all kinds of things around it, and they all work together synergistically to work together. That's why I love the Nutrilite line so much, is that so much of the things that we get a lot of YouTubes that are really informative, but then at the bottom line they're promoting a product, which is understandable, but the thing is that we have so much of that already in our supplementation. And I think that's why they promote so much the concentrated fruits and vegetables along with the double X and the omegas as the foundational, because so many things are already in there, but they're in, and even if you take extras of a particular Nutrilite line, everything surrounding what it says on that container is all these contributing factors that make that supplement that you're taking, the vitamin C or whatever it is, make it work much better, because again, it's Mother Nature and it's in the balance. And balance, I think, is the key here. So that's just a quick thought.
Yeah, great point there. When we hear certain products or something that's mentioned or promoted out there, and it's an individual solo ingredient, to be informed, to look at things in the context that sometimes, many times, oftentimes, and certainly with the Nutrilite, they're not doing a single product, because there's a recognition of like vitamin D3 with K2 might be an example of that, right, Carol? So I
Exactly.
know, you've spoken so much on bone health and so forth. So that's an example of that for sure. So great footnote on that. While I know it's always a surprise when we look up and we go, wow, an hour's already gone by. But here we are again. It's happened. We've covered things on A1C. We heard from Charlie on some lipid panel numbers and updates on that, non-scale victories. David Munoz on the Yucca app and just the whole app and ingredient readings. And then Steve on the NSF update, huge. Lots of other, non-formal docket items. Laurel on the update on the Nutrilite moving from California to here, Jerry Webb, and many others that I'm not mentioning here, but all to say that that's our community, and that's what's so fun about this. So that said, it's it for today. I'll get this uploaded onto YouTube, but until then, we'll plan on next Saturday, same time, same place. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Have a great
everybody.
day.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Everybody.
you.
Have a good week.